Okay, Dave asked me if I could do a demonstration on the end sealers. I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to show him how to make it.
Hey guys,
So it's not really a demonstration. So I was thinking about it. Yeah, I'm going to show you how to make your own end sealer. So I guess it is more or less a demonstration. End sealer, when we cut wood, we know that we need to seal the ends. I don't have a label on this one. This is Anchorseal. This has been the traditional end sealer for a number of years. 1980, it was developed by UC Coatings. Why do we need end sealers? Which brings up the question, why does wood crack? Well, we all know that wood is a bundle of straws. And within the straws are water. And wood is hygroscopic, which means it will absorb and give off water. That means that as the water is evaporating out of the tubules, the phloem canals, they shrink. So our bundle of straws is going to get thinner in this direction, but not so much along the length of the wood, which means that the wood shrinks faster in one direction than another. That increase in that uneven shrinkage introduces stress and ultimately cracks. So how do we stop that? How do we slow that down? We change the rate at which water is lost off of the end. Hence the name end sealer. Now, Anchorseal was developed for the Forestry Service and also for the commercial timber industry as a way of quickly closing up the end of logs that are cut and on the way to the mill. Also, after boards are cut out of them, we wanted a way to close the end up for the same reason. If we have a stack of boards, we're going to lose water off the end and off the side. Our boards are going to bend and warp and also crack. So the end sealers have been used to slow down the loss of water and allow wood to age without cracking, without warping, without bending. Now the heartwood, if you look at our log, there's the pith. The heartwood is that first 20 growth rings around the pith. This is going to dry much faster because the pith, because the rings, the phloem tubes, are hard. They don't expand or contract. They're just pipes. So the water flows out of there very quickly. So you can see that this is going to dry, and as this shrinks, pressure is going to develop in that direction, and that wood will crack from the pith right straight to the edge. Yeah.
You're saying the hardwood dries faster than the sapwood?
Yeah. This also brings up another observation I did not realize. If you're sealing a log that's more than 24 inches in diameter, 12 inches on a side, you need at least 2 coats of Anchorseal applied within 15 minutes. Which brings up the advantage of Anchorseal originally as it was developed. That can be diluted down to basically the density of water. So you can have a guy with essentially a hose standing at the end of the log truck, just painting the end of the log with Anchorseal. And the Anchorseal will, by the nature of its chemical composition, bind to the wood and begin to close in on itself and form solid layers.
What's magic about 15 minutes?
That's the instructions you get. 15 minutes.
I mean, it's still wet.
It's still wet, but as we're going to see here in a minute, the actual emulsion starts to break down after about 15 minutes, and you need to have something else out there to cover it.
So Mike, the Anchorseal we buy here, are you saying we actually can dilute it down to?
No. It's, what you get, the club buys 55-gallon drums of Anchorseal from UC. And it's already diluted to the ready-to-use concentration.
Okay, that's what I
Now,
want.
Anchorseal 2 is a more dilute version of it. And if you ever use it, you know it doesn't work as well because there's not as much of the material in it. Anchorseal is what's referred to as what to me is an oxymoron, a water-soluble wax. That doesn't work from a chemist's point of view. Because the waxes are by definition hydrophobic and the water is hydrophilic. What it means is that Anchorseal is an emulsion. So what is an emulsion? You all know this. Think about
Salad dressing.
salad dressing. Exactly. You take oil and vinegar salad dressing, you put it in a bottle, you got the oil on top, you got the vinegar on the bottom, and you shake that bottle, and you put energy into the system, you break up the oil into small little particles, which can then disperse into the water. But if you don't pour it quick, you wind up with your oil and water again. Now, there are things that can be put into that. Garlic actually works very well for that. That are emulsifying agents. That is, they will keep the oil and the water phase joined together. And in the Anchorseal, there are emulsifying agents that will allow the wax. There's our liquid level. And here is our wax, little particles. It allows them to stay separated. So you don't have to shake up your bottle of Anchorseal. It's already distributed. But this liquid is a volatile solvent, which means that as soon as you expose it to the air, it begins to evaporate. So pretty soon, our wax particles are much closer together, and eventually they form a solid layer and they bind to each other. So I've lived my life by two fairly simple rules. One of them, you all know, cheap tools aren't a bargain, they're just cheap. But the other is, if you understand the chemistry, the rest of it makes a lot of sense. The wax particles themselves are reactive 3-carbon subunits. And if you keep them separated, they're happy. If you push them together, they react with each other to form polymers, long chains of waxy material. And that's the solid material that forms over the end of the cut piece of wood. So
Is that paraffin?
no, it's not. Paraffin is just a generic description of an unsaturated fat that's got an oxygen and another chain next to it, paraffin wax. Paraffin oil is just unsaturated fat.
What kind of wax is it?
This is what I sort of had a problem with the identification of Anchorseal as a wax, because this is a propylene glycol. If you remember, glycol is bisimyl hydroxyls. And
Thank you for
You all remember that.
That had slipped my mind.
It was on the tip of my tongue. But, you know,
Hey, it was on the test last week.
what this means is that the world of chemistry runs on magnetism. Certain elements draw electrons to them, certain elements repel electrons. It's all magnets. Oxygen draws electrons this way, which means you activate that position there, that carbon. You get another one here, attacks there, and you wind up with a polymer that is an insoluble lipophilic material. They call it a wax because there's oxygen in the backbone. Okay. I'm not going to quibble with it. But once you get that solid formed across the end, they say it will prevent they being UC UC coatings, they say it will prevent 90% of cracks. I've used Anchorseal for a long time, and I am not willing to add weight to their 90% claim. It works pretty well. We've all used it to treat freshly cut logs. If you have freshly cut lumber, you've probably treated the end with that. And also a once-turned bowl. If you cover the end grain of a once-turned bowl, it will dehydrate and will lose water, and eventually you'll get a dry bowl you can return. Now, because wood is hygroscopic, it gains and loses wood. Implied in all of this is the conditions where you're drying your wood needs to be fairly stable. Dave's concrete floor under the bench is as good an example as I can come up with on short notice. There's no breeze, the temperature is constant, the concrete is a large thermal mass that keeps the temperature the same. So anything you can do to slow down that gain and loss of water will help you to dry the wood and not crack it. So Anchorseal has been, our standard for a number of years. They estimate that water is lost from the end of the log 7 times faster than from the side. Yeah.
So there was a product called PEG, PEG.
Yeah, polyethylene glycol.
Is that different than Anchorseal?
Okay. Remember the glycol. That's the active chemical structure.
Okay.
Polyethylene glycol is another sort of water-soluble wax that will follow the same rules as our propyl glycol. If you eliminate the solvents, it will eventually solidify and form a solid layer. But the Anchorseal has worked pretty well, and I haven't had the complaints with it that a lot of people have. Perhaps because I just instinctively put 2 coats on, and that seems to have helped. Now, there's other things that have been used as end seals.
How far apart on applying the 2 coats?
I'm seldom doing a whole log truck, so it's not a hurry to get back to it. But within, before it actually dries, I'm putting the second coat onto a wet first coat, sort of forcing the liquid into the wood and then giving everything a nice place to set up. Other things that have been used as end seals, latex paint is the one you hear about a lot. That also struck me as not particularly a good idea because latex paint is engineered to let water move through it so that the wall underneath it doesn't collect moisture, grow fungus, or you don't degenerate the drywall. So paint, the latex paint I can't see as a particularly good end sealer. Oil-based paint or acrylic-based paint, alkyd-based paint, those would work pretty well because those will make a solid water screen that will allow the wood to dry at its own rate.
So what about milk paint? Although it would be a pain in the ass to mix up.
Milk paint, I can't tell you. I'm guessing. I think of milk paint more in terms of tempera than although it's using the fat in the milk as your oil base for the emulsion.
It's basically that plus water.
Yeah.
Plus water. It's very hard.
Yeah. Now the lime is going to make it more alkaline, which is going to speed up this process. So what you're doing is making the fat in the milk polymerize to form a solid layer. So I can't tell you, I have no experience in that, but from the looking at it, it might work. Now the emulsifying agents that we find in Anchorseal are really just things to coat the outside of our growing wax particle. Okay. Well, there's our tub again. This is our water layer. And there's our oily layer the growing wax. Emulsifying agents literally just bury themselves in the oil particles so that the hydrophobic end, the water-soluble end, is on the outside, the fat-soluble end is on the inside. And this is enough to keep that particle in suspension as it continues to grow and eventually forms its own single layer. Dishwashing liquid, dishwashing soap is the best example I can think of that. The soap, the detergent, binds to the oil particles on your dirty dishes, also allows the water to hold those oil particles. Now, if I'm sure you all remember doing dishes.
Soap can be used as an emulsifying agent.
Right.
If you want to make it your own.
Yeah, that would be an emulsifying agent. But as you do the dishes, you see the little pools of oil on the top, and if you watch them, they will coalesce. That's the oil moving together, just like this process. So we've all seen the emulsifying agents and emulsions. Mayonnaise is another one, where you have the egg protein that's holding the fat-soluble material, or the water-soluble material in that case, into the oil, the vegetable oil that you mix the egg yolks or the eggs with. So we deal with emulsions on a daily basis. But they're all chemically doing the same thing. You're taking two immiscible liquids and compelling them to move together. Now, the Anchorseal, like I said, has been used for years by many people, but people are starting to kind of complain about it. I've heard complaints in this group, actually, about it not working as well. And I'm very quick to go to operator error when there's something that should work and it's not. Either not getting enough on or not getting enough coverage or not applying it properly, whatever. But there are other objections to the Anchorseal, one of which I had heard but not really seen demonstrated, is that if you turn a piece of wood that's covered with Anchorseal, dried Anchorseal, it will make the floor of your shop slippery.
Yes, it will.
You will?
If you've got a basement floor that is polished
Concrete, right. Right.
it definitely will.
Yeah, when I was at Glenn Lucas's shop, he's one of the people who's making that claim more publicly. And he actually demonstrated it, and it did work. So the question is, we don't want that. It makes kind of a mess. The Anchorseal can disturb how the surface turns because it's making the grain harder. Many things about it that really don't add to the turning of the wood. So what else is there used? Well, the other thing that actually the thing that Glenn introduced me to, although I'm old friends with this, PVA glue. Now, years and years ago, I lived in Baltimore in a row house that was built in 1938. Beautiful plaster walls. I mean, you don't see walls like that anymore. The curved and the curved corners, beautiful. I had to repair one of those walls. Learning to plaster was not hard. Learning to finish plaster, that's hard. And I finally called a guy and he said, "No, you paint it with PVA." What? And he pulls out a glass jar. This was back in the 70s. Of polyvinyl acetate, PVA, diluted it with water, and painted that over the plaster surface. And what that did is it closed the plaster off and made a smooth surface over which you could apply paint. Well, PVA is what many of the European turners use to seal the wood. And it's polyvinyl acetate sounds suspiciously propylene. Polyvinyl acetate is this molecule with acetic acid stuff on it. So you look at that structure and say there's two oxygens and it's really good leaving. This is going to form a chain very quickly of its own accord. Like I said, if you understand the chemistry, the rest of it makes sense.
PVA is just yellow, like yellow glue.
Yeah. Well, PVA glue is white.
So your typical armor glue?
The Tight Bond is yellow.
Yeah.
That's also a PVA glue. Actually, all of the glues commonly used in woodworking are PVA glues of one flavor or another, and they work very well. There's a significant collection of YouTube videos on using PVA glue as an end blocker, end sealer. So about 3 months ago, I started playing with this. And I thought, well, why not? I haven't done any experiments for a while. It's time to get back to work. And I set up a bunch of freshly cut maple, big leaf maple, sealed the ends with Anchorseal, undiluted PVA, or undiluted Tight Bond, which is the variety of glue that's most recommended. 1-to-1, one part water, 1 part Tight Bond, 2-to-1, 2 parts water, 1 part Tight Bond, and a 5-to-1, 1 part Tight Bond, 5 parts water. Because if you look on the PVA, they actually tell you can dilute it 5-to-1. That's for painting plaster. That's not for sealing wood. And 3 months is not a long enough time, so I'll report back in about a year on what I found. Thus far, the only ones that have cracked are the 5-to-1. The undiluted, the Anchorseal, the other PVA dilutions are just fine. Yes.
So I'm backing up a little bit, Mike. You had mentioned that the end grain emits water or dries 7 times faster than
Yes.
the side grain. Is that an argument then for just using Anchorseal on the end grain, allowing the face in the side grain to
Yes. That's why it's an end
speed
sealer.
up? The idea is to get it in balance, right?
Right, and it will. Even though you have an end sealer coat over the end, you don't block all the water. It's not an absolute dam. So what you've done is reduce that 7 times to be closer to the 1 time. And out of all of this, my incursion into the end sealer world, what I learned is stable conditions are the most important thing to drying wood. That's why you can put wood in a kiln and dry it down to whatever, and you're going to get very, very low levels of cracking, because once the temperature goes up, it doesn't change. The water is carried off uniformly because there's always a breeze going through. Now, if you had the temperature going up and down and you had the wind coming and going, you would not get those consistent results. So really, our end sealer is just providing consistent conditions for the wood to dry itself.
So it's the argument for diluting it. First of all, we'll go for it. You won't have to spend as much money on glue. Let's say you dilute it 1-to-1. Just like do it in a bucket or in a container and just stir it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is my 2-to-1 water to Tight Bond in my salsa container, and this has not changed in appearance in the 3 months that I've had it diluted. I can pull this out, and
It's easy to dilute. It doesn't get all clumpy or anything
Nope.
like that.
not in my experience.
So I have a second question. Going back to, so I've been working with some greenwood for furniture, and I bought a log, and I've been splitting it and writing it, and making it into smaller parts. I unsealed it. I unsealed the log before we cut it up,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I cut, I made it 2 pieces, so I sealed the ends once. But I haven't been sealing parts as I've been making them out. And the logs are really, they're pretty wet.
Yeah.
And do I run the risk of all that stuff cracking? if
Yes.
I don't keep the ends
It
sealing?
can crack, it can bend. Anything that's true, here is going to be true in your stack of lumber. Now, if you look at
How far are you writing them down? Are you writing down to the blanks, the winter chairs?
Well, for ladderback chairs, yes, but also for different chair parts, there are different dimensions. So,
yeah,
but most of them are to 2 inches or 2 inches by 2 inches or something like that.
Yeah, the
Obviously,
example,
if I leave it the same length as it was, that's fine, but if I'm cutting it, now I'm
Right.
creating a whole new bunch of straws that are
exposed. I mean, those should be sealed. I would think the, depending on how much you take it down, you get to a point where the, if you have any circles, water is going out through the top and out through the bottom. So your distance to water travel is really half the diameter.
there's less density.
Right. If you've turned it down thin enough, that water could be lost very readily without creating that variation in pressure within the wood.
Well, some of that stuff I want to keep wet because when you do the joinery,
Right,
you want
then-
your mortises to be wet, and then
Yeah.
the rungs. I have a little kiln. I made a little box with light
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
I'll dry that super dry, so I want super dry tenons going into wet mortises, and then as the
Yeah.
mortise dries, it gets smaller and the tenons expand.
You can also dip the ends of your wood back in water to wet it before you put it back together.
Right. Yeah. So I probably should be. I
It-
should
yeah.
keep some. I'm going to try
Look-
the glue.
Look and see. See if you can see. Look at the ends and see if there are little cracks starting to develop. And if there are, slap some glue on them.
I'd like that glue idea. It's a lot cheaper.
Well,
Some glue.
Anchorseal is $25 to $30 a gallon, and that'll cover 100 square feet. They say. If you think about the end of a log truck and all the square feet you got to cover there with a couple of coats.
Anchorseal's less
Sprayer.
messy than glue too.
Yeah. The glue, the Type Bond bottles, I do a lot of work with Lowe's. So I negotiated a price for us with them, $20 a gallon. So if we say, let's take that gallon and we're going to dilute that 2 to 1. I think just from ease of application, speed of drying,
Now you're down to $7 again.
yeah,
And
and that's.
is there any difference between Type Bond 1 and 2 for what you're
Yes,
talking about?
yes, there is. Type Bond 2 and 3. Type Bond 3 is a polypropyl glue. It's a water resistant glue, and is not really appropriate for our purposes. It's more like Gorilla Glue than Type Bond. Type Bond 1 is the original formulation, and it hasn't changed since about 1930 when it came on the market. Type Bond 2 has something to speed up polymerization. And I don't know how that was going to affect the end blocker application of it.
So you've been using 1.
I've been using 1, and that's what everyone in the YouTube videos has been using.
So why not use the wall PVA?
Because this is about 4 times as expensive.
Got it. That answers that question.
Yes.
About 3 years ago, I switched to PVA. And what I have about 450 bowls drying all the time. And what I noticed right away was actually the crack rate was about 1/3 of what I saw with the Anchorseal.
Yeah.
Also, the drying time was half.
Half. I noticed that also.
The drying time, because I run out of bowls. That's why I ended up drying so many bowls. I got tired of running out, not doing anything. So based on drying time and then the crack rate, I switched over at that point to all PVA.
Yeah.
And there was something else too that I noticed is the warping and the shapes of the bowl. When I used Anchorseal, I did it just the way I was told. I did the end grains, I mean, I tried to follow the directions that we say. And some of those bowls were shaped like a canoe.
Yes, that's
Because they dry differently. And the ends, there was with PVA glue, you have moisture going out of that. But it's slow, but it's a little different than Anchorseal. And so I would get these bowls that would be shaped like this, so I had to
The
work
ends
with
sort of
that
bend over.
warpage all the time and everything, and it was really frustrating. So then when I switched over to PVA glue, my distortion or warping or whatever you want to call it of the bowl went way, way down.
Yeah.
I mean, it saved a lot. The cracks greatly reduced, you know, and the drying time. So the next thing, and I agree with everything you're saying, Mike, is to keep your shop as constant as you can for, you know, the environment to dry your bowls
Or
with.
at least the place where you're drying your wood,
Yes.
you know.
So I
Put up
keep my
screens to
shop, I run it in the low 60s, temperature wise, and then my humidity just about 50 or below. What happens, and I've watched, because I've got the humidity in my shop, I got a little meter displayed right there. When I turn bowl and all that wet chips are there, my humidity just goes right up in my shop. My shop is only 10 by 25, so it's not as big as this. But my humidity really goes up, and I'm trying to dry bowls and my shelves. And so I immediately, after I turn a wet bowl, I put my shavings in a bin and cover it. And I'm able to keep, I've got a humidifier too. I only turn on when the humidity gets real high. But in the Portland area, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but there's only 2 months where the conditions are ideal to get your bowl down to 12% moisture. The other 10 months, your bowls will never get down to 12%, by the way. And I told the guy, get your bowls down to 12%. And he put it, he had a big pile. So he did them in his shop, and he called back, like 6 months later or whatever. He says, Don, I tested all the bowls and they're at 14%.
Of course they are, 'cause that's what the.
And that's the conditions that we're in here.
I used to go down to Phoenix to do demonstrations a lot, and I would bring wood with me. That was the first couple of times.
Yes,
By the time I got down to Phoenix, the wood I had brought was cracked.
yeah.
So I just started telling, set me aside this, and this, so I don't have to worry about it cracking. And you can have it when I'm done. Well, I found that the bowls that I had once turned, I don't do just the end grain. I cover the whole outside of the bowl and leave the inside open because you have a symmetrical area through which you can lose water. And very seldom do they crack, and they didn't. Every now and then I'd make a canoe, but not that often.
Well, Mike, I don't know the chemistry like you do. You excel, and that was a very good explanation. But since I've been switched to PVA glue, what I did with my shelves, because exactly what you're saying. So I have all these shelves. I've tried to neatly arrange my shop because it's so small. I put a sheet in front of each of my shelves which was a breathable sheet, but it keeps the air flow out of there. Mm-hmm. So it's just a stagnant area in a way, but another way it breathes. And so, you try to address all these things, and it's a combination. It's a sealant combination. It's the environment combination.
It's like when your hand is wet and you blow across it. You feel the cold. Well, that's the water evaporating. That's the sort of stress that you're introducing by air flowing across your bowl. So anything you can do to stabilize that is a good thing. Now,
Is that the argument for the paper bag idea that you put in a bag?
Paper bag with the shavings in it is to keep the humidity up, or to reduce the change in humidity in the bowl. So you kind of keep the bowl and the chips dry at the same rate. So everything is going down together. So you don't have this sudden loss of humidity in your bowl.
Right. Elizabeth, the person who taught last week, she said without the chips. She just said,
I had better luck with the chips. Either way, you're keeping the wind off the bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
You put wet chips in? You put the wet chips
No, I use the chips off the floor that came off that used to be part of that bowl. But also she's working with the natural edge. The bark is very different. That's a whole nother thing on the edge of that wood. And it's going to dry differently. And she's looking to preserve the connection between the wood and the bark.
When you rough turn a bowl, you put it this way in your shed when you're drying it, or this way?
Out of habit.
Me too.
I can answer that.
I've had them. I've tried them this way, and they crack at a higher rate than if I put them this way. But I do a lot of coring, so I'll put the chips in between the cores and have them sitting up, and I get less cracks that way than if I flip them over. And I don't know why. It's just the way it is.
Don, what do you find? Don?
Okay, so I took 10 walnut bowls, 10-inch diameter, 1-inch thick walls. Half of them I flipped over, half of them I set up right, and I started running my own test to see. I've frozen bowls, I've run them upside down, I've done different things, to see. I mean, I don't know for shit, especially in Portland area because it's different, and you can't just take an idea from Florida and apply it here because it's different environmental conditions. So there's a lot of things in play. So anyway, I flipped the bowls up, I measured them, moisture content and all that stuff, and I could see no difference between flipping them up and down. I know you're saying crack-wise, but I saw no difference but my population was only 10 bowls. Okay, so maybe, and your conditions might be a little different than my shop. So I didn't see any difference of that. Flipping the bowl, drying it upside down versus upside down. The moisture, the crack rate, everything was the same. So, yeah.
So anyway, there are other.
Sorry, Mark.
Nobody knows. Nobody's the expert on this. Certainly not me. This is a new product brought out by Craft Supply. Craft Supply. It's a PVA glue that's green instead of yellow, and their claims 100 square feet per gallon.
What do they call it?
Tree Saver Greenwood Sealer. And
That's a PVA glue.
it's a PVA glue. You have to look very closely in the material safety sheet. But yes, this is a PVA. And they say it will dry twice as fast. Well, what they've done is they've replaced the water with a more volatile organic solvent. And that's fine. Just
And the
don't.
price is 4 times higher.
Pretty much, yeah. So anyway, well, I told you I was gonna teach you how to make something. This Type Bond, 1 part Type Bond, 2 parts water. Put it in your salsa jar or whatever, mix it up, and you have end sealer.
And is that Type Bond 1 or 2?
This is Type Bond 1. This is the original.
And if you want it green, just
Right. If you want colors,
Just mix it with a stick like paint, or
That's
do
the
you
red,
green
red
stir?
top, right?
Mike?
yes, it's the red color.
Yeah. No. Sure. So mix it with a stick, or do you need a twirler?
I don't know. I just put it in the jar and shook it up.
Shake it up.
So that's 2 parts water to 1 part Type Bond.
Right. It's sort of the salad dressing model, Impart energy to the system and you emulsify.
Is it like
the
salad
liquid.
dressing? You have to reshake it when you use it.
No, actually, I haven't noticed it separating at all.
Okay.
I got it set up. I set it on a shelf in front of a light, and I don't see phases reappearing.
Mike, I bought wood from Craft Supply, Anchorseal, but with something else. I don't know if it's Tree Saver or something that
They're buying their wood from other guys that
Yeah.
are doing the cheapest, fastest thing they can do to seal it. Most often it's paraffin wax.
Well, I have gotten some that seemed like it had a thick coat of varnish on it, and wherever there was a curtain that had dried hard, it was basically a saw blade. So you really need to take that, trim that off, or you slice yourself up pretty bad with it because it's brittle and sharp.
It's what on a commercial scale what you would do it with. I can't tell you. I know the wax. I've seen places that have just molten wax buckets. They dip because it hardens very quickly. So you're taking your wood, dipping it, chipping it, and that's what they need for their particular application. This dries much faster than Anchorseal. I found the best thing to put it on with.
A brush?
It's over by the banjo.
by the banjo.
The roller.
Roller.
The banjo.
Right there.
By your elbow.
There we go. I found that these little foam rollers work really well because they have enough give that if you're going over a high piece of wood or a rough spot, they will still go down around the edges and apply it and when you're done, you just throw this in a bucket of water, and it'll wash out. It'll re-emulsify the glue, and give you a flexible roller back when you're done.
So you can reuse the roller?
Let it soak, and then just knock the water out of it, and it'll dry out, and it's ready to go the next time you want to use it. So, what the club is going to do, and we've had Anchorseal because John has been willing to do the work to give it to us. This, I think, will be a lot easier, and I would not be surprised if the membership just started buying their own glue and making their own end sealer. Because as far as I can tell you, it will last for at least 3 months. I'll keep reporting on it as we go. But it's an easier solution to end sealing, and it works.
How many coats?
I do too. That's just
Still
me.
doing two?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only explanation for that was that the log's larger than 24 inches, and I don't know what 24 inches is the drop dead line. They say you have to do that 2 coats very quickly, basically one right after another. It has probably more to do with applying it here, and it's dry on this end when you get it. It's wet on this end, and you go back and do it again. I follow directions if someone gives them to me.
Does it dry faster than Anchorseal?
Yes,
Okay.
about twice as fast.
So how do they compare price-wise if you're talking 2 to 1 with them?
Well, you figure I pay $20 a gallon for Type Bond. I got a deal from Lowe's. It was really good to me. And so we're going to dilute that 2 to 1. So out of 1 gallon, we're going to get 3 gallons of N-Seal. So $6.50.
$7 or $8.
Those containers that have the type on it, is that a gallon or half gallon?
This?
The one behind you.
Oh, that's a
It's
half gallon.
So that size would be.
We're gonna keep the same price.
Yeah.
So Type Bond 1 is not waterproof.
No.
So
If it were, it really wouldn't work too well for our purposes, would it?
no, but my question is, sometimes like you have a log and you just want to save it, you might leave it outside,
Uh-huh.
it's rained on. Is that Type Bond 1 is that going to break down then, sitting on the end of the log?
No, once it sets, it's not going to be redissolved. Now, Elmer's Glue is the other well-known PVA. They make a school glue, a brand of glue that's for kids. And that's got a moisturizer in it so that you can wash it out of the clothes. Which is at least that's what the 3M guys said.
Remember us stuff you used to eat when you were in second grade?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you did.
So if you use that to seal your log and it rained, it would
That's
redissolve.
interesting because if Type Bond 1 is not a waterproof glue, that means it wouldn't hold if it gets wet. That doesn't
No. Waterproof means miscibility. Okay. Type Bond 3 is a polypropyl glue, completely immiscible in water. Type Bond 1 in a liquid, very miscible in water. But once you've made the solid,
That film will stay there.
that's going to stay as a solid.
This sounds like a really good solution.
So far, I've been very pleased with it. I have not actually. I was going to finish a bowl this weekend and paint it up, so we got some different kinds of things to compare. But I think it's a good solution. It's a whole lot less work for John, so I'm in favor of that. And if it's something that you can do for yourself.
Be interested, after you turn some of it, whether you have a skating rink under your feet.
Apparently, that's one of the most common objections to Anchorseal. And in all the videos I've seen about the glue end seal, no one has mentioned the slick film.
That's
And in fact, what this is going to make as a polymer is more like a cutting board plastic, whereas Anchorseal, it does have some waxy characteristics.
Yes, it does.
So I've never had it happen, but I saw it demonstrated. It does happen. Yeah.
So talking about the slick floor and a little different topic, but my shop is concrete like everybody else's floor. and standing on my lathe, I started having hip problems then. So I went to Wilco Farmers and bought a horse mat, which is the heavy rubber. Cut it to fit underneath my lathe. It's great to stand on. It's a little bit softer surface. I've noticed a real difference
Yeah.
having a mat like that.
Well, the other thing is get yourself a pair of the Skechers step-in.
Yeah,
the
well,
old man shoes with a sole about that thick that's foam.
I like the horse mat. It's, I don't have to worry about
That
what
way,
shoes I'm wearing
they
in the shop.
travel with.
Go stand on the Carmatic mats for a while, because that's exactly what they are.
They're really
And it does make a difference. Anyway. Okay, so,
Quick question,
so much for Anchorseal.
You mentioned Anchorseal 2.
Yes.
Disparagingly, it sounds like. Woodcraft talked me into buying a gallon of that stuff, so.
And you listen,
It doesn't work as well
No.
as the Anchorseal?
what you do have to do is put on more coats at the same time.
So that's-
Anchorseal 2 is made, again, remember who this was made for. It's for the Forestry Service and for the companies that are harvesting logs. You got guys with 50-gallon tanks on their back and they're doing this. Anchorseal 2 is made to be sprayed. It has a higher solvent content, so it's going to dry faster when it hits the log. But I've never found it to give quite as good a seal.
It probably has less solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes pretty,
Runny?
runny.
Yeah.
Biscuits, I think.
Viscous.
You
It's
mentioned
not
Elmer's.
particularly, not particularly viscous.
Elmer's and Type 1 are basically the same thing. Just
Except for the color, the Elmer's does not have. Elmer's has a different polymerizing agent, although it has a PVA. PVA is just a great big family of molecules. It's made to set up a little slower, and it's made to set up clear, whereas Type Bond will drive translucent, but not clear.
Same with most generic white PVA glue you can buy by the gallon.
Yeah. I would think they would all pretty much work. Just you have to look at the material data safety sheet, the MSDS, and look for something that will say polyvinyl something or another. Those are the PVAs.
And just a last comment, when you're doing the ends, you want to get up over the corners.
Oh yeah, yeah. You want to seal every sharp edge. And every like if you're doing square pieces, I always go over the edge about an inch on all sides, just so that that's where the crack is going to form. Because if you think about our models here, that's where the expansion of the tubes or the shrinking of the tubes is going to be most noticeable, is right at the end. So yes, cover all the sharp edges. Actually, when you're cutting them, take those sharp edges off.
I just slap it on the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep.
It's cheap.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Mike. That's it.
There'll be a test on this at the next meeting.
Including the chemical